My name is Mara Quinlan, 29 years old. Dinner should have been quiet. A clatter of silverware, the soft hum of the old radiator, my father's low throat clearing when the roast was too dry. Instead, my mother drove her fork into the plate so hard it shrieked, then pointed it like a verdict. 48 hours, she said. Pack your things. The house is Terra's. The words didn't land all at once. They kept arriving in the room like a draft you can't find and can't stop. My father stared at his mashed potatoes as if the right answer were buried in the buttered crater. He didn't look at me, not once. He took another bite he didn't want, as if chewing would make it less real. I kept my hands under the table because I could feel them start to shake, and I refused to give my mother that satisfaction. On the buffet behind her, my grandfather's chipped mug, the one with the little blue pine cones faded by 1,000 dishwashings, caught the kitchen light and squinted back at me. I don't know why I noticed it then, except that it was the only thing in the room that belonged to a promise someone once kept. "This is a joke," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like the creak in the third stair I'd fixed twice and could never quite silence. I paid the arrears. I kept us out of foreclosure. You did what a daughter should, my mother cut in, a fast, dismissive swipe. Family helps family. Tara's the one starting a family. She needs the house. You're fine. Fine, I repeated. My father's gaze slipped up from the plate and then away, a small, guilty shuttle. When my mother said deed transfer, his eyes flicked, just for a second, down the hall toward the closet with the old desk inside, the one that used to stick in winter. A micro glance, gone so quickly I could have imagined it. I didn't. Something about that closet made my ribs tighten. Behind the glass, night sat heavy on North Avenue. The snowbank outside was crusted gray and glittering in places where the streetlight hit it. If I looked past my mother's shoulder, I could see the pale triangle of Mrs. Linda's living room across the street, the flicker of her TV. Next door, Mr. Williams' porch light was still on. He always forgot to turn it off. Two small squares of ordinary life in a neighborhood where people waved, lent ladders, swapped cookie tins in December. I had spent 5 years making sure this house was one of those squares. Fresh paint, straight floorboards, the bank never calling again. I had taken on overtime until my eyes stung at the screen. I had drained an $80,000 reserve I told myself I could rebuild. I told myself a lot of things. I told myself it was love. Terra lives in California, I said finally. She calls on birthdays when she remembers. We've seen her 3 times in 6 years. My mother set the fork down very gently now, as if the loud part were done. It's decided. Decided. Past tense. Pre-packaged. I looked between them. My father pushed his chair back. The leg scraped the hardwood in a long, apologetic sound. "We can talk in the morning," he murmured, to no one in particular. He rinsed his plate, left it in the sink like he always did, and left the room like a man escaping a small fire without alarming the neighbors. "You have 48 hours, my mother repeated, as if I were hard of hearing. Don't make this worse than it has to be." Worse than what? I wanted to ask. Worse than pretending I hadn't kept the beams standing while you admired the wallpaper? But a fight felt like a thing that would give them more air, more reasons to claim I was the unreasonable one. So I pushed back from the table slowly, brushed a stray breadcrumb from the placemat I'd chosen last spring when I repainted the kitchen a warm beige, and I walked out. The hallway felt narrower than usual, the walls closer. My hand found the oval brass knob of the hall closet without meaning to. The desk inside sat low and stubborn, its top scarred by my grandfather's coins and my father's pocket knife. I tried the drawer. Stuck, same as always. The old wood grumbled, then gave an inch, then refused. It had always been like that. A little, but not enough. I let it go. In my room, the ceiling fan ticked with the lazy rhythm of an old clock. I closed the door, leaned my head against it, and listened to my breathing until it belonged to me. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled my laptop close, the way you might pull a map across your lap at the edge of a forest. The part of me that wanted to cry was loud and episodic. The part of me that could count and list and plan spoke more softly but never lied. It told me to write down every item I'd paid for, the sofa, the TV, the washer, the curtains, to pull the receipts from the file folder under the bed, to scan what I didn't have digitized, to photograph serial numbers, to take my life back in barcodes and timestamps, to keep my anger moving so it didn't harden. I opened notes and started a list, then another list. Utilities in my name, subscriptions, property tax statements I'd fronted when money was tight for a month that turned into 3. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. It buzzed again. I let it go. The third time, I flipped it over and watched the notification fade. There was a time I answered everything on the first ring. That woman was very helpful and very tired. I typed Kristen's name into messages. She and I had pulled all-nighters at the University of Vermont, back when we thought emergencies were exams and heartbreak only lasted a week. Now she wore suits that made judges listen. I didn't dress for court, but I knew how to log a logjam and pry. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could write the whole story. I could write a thesis on loyalty and a receipt for gratitude, or I could write one sentence and let the part of the world that deals in paper do the rest. I typed, "Check Granddad's will." The radiator clicked on and did that muffled knocking you feel in your shins. I stood, crossed the room, and raised the blind a bit. Out across the street, Linda's curtains were a soft yellow. A shape passed, her cat. The steady light on William's porch hummed. I tried to imagine this block without me living on it, without my car in the drive, without the faint glow of my bedroom lamp at 2 a.m. on the weeks I wrote code until the logic finally made sense. I tried to imagine Terra's suitcase in the hall, her shoes by the door, her voice on the phone calling someone else "babe" while my mother made her tea. The picture slid off the wall of my mind like a frame hung on a bent nail. My mother knocked once on my door but didn't wait. She opened it a few inches, enough to look in, not enough to admit that looking in was an intrusion. "Do not drag lawyers into this," she said. "We will handle it like a family." "You mean like tonight?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "Don't be cruel." Cruel felt like the wrong word. Cruel was tearing out floorboards and leaving nails upturned. Cruel was locking someone out in January. I wasn't that person. I had patched and sanded and smoothed. I had kept heat in the pipes and food in the fridge. The cruelest I'd been lately was forgetting to buy Dad his raisin bread on a Sunday. "I'll be out of your way in 48 hours, I said, "and I won't leave you with anything you didn't earn." She flinched at that, not with guilt, but with the offense of someone who thinks they have a right not to be indicted by the truth. "Terra flies in tomorrow," she said, as if that settled time itself. She closed the door without waiting for my answer. I stared at the wood grain where her fingers had rested and thought about all the doors in this house and what they were designed to keep in or out. For the first time, the bedroom didn't feel like shelter. It felt like the last square in a board game I was about to step off. I opened my closet, pulled down the plastic bin of files, and set it on the bed. Inside, taxes, leases, warranties, an old Polaroid of my grandfather standing by the oak tree out back in a flannel shirt that made his eyes kinder. He had built porch steps that did not squeak. He had a way of looking at you with his head slightly cocked, as if he were listening for the real thing you were too polite to say. Once, on the porch, he'd sipped tea from that pine cone mug and said, out of nowhere, "You keep promises, kiddo. This place listens to that." I had laughed because I didn't understand that a house could be a witness. He had. He'd carved his initials in the sill under the kitchen window. I had painted over them once, then felt guilty and sanded them back into view. My phone lit up with the text. "Kristen, call?" I typed, "Can't. Mom patrolling." She wrote back, "Office at 8 a.m. County clerk opens at 9. I stared at that line until the numbers steadied me. 8. 9. I could live inside that small future for the rest of the night. I shut the laptop and stood. The house creaked in familiar places, like it always did when the heat rose and the beams shifted. In the kitchen, the plate from dinner still sat crookedly on the table. I picked up my grandfather's mug. It was lighter than it looked, as if time had taken some of the clay with it. The rim was hairline cracked under my thumb, a tiny ladder of white fractures in the glaze. I tipped it. Something made a faint, delayed sound, like a grain of sand falling inside a shell. I frowned, listened harder, shook it once. Silence. Maybe a trick of the ear. I set it back where the light could catch it. A superstition rose in me I didn't like. Leave the mug. Don't take it yet. Not until you know. On my way back to the room, I passed the hall closet again. I slid 2 fingers under the drawer lip and pulled. It stuck, then yielded a grudging inch, enough to show the corner of a manila envelope inside, edges darkened by dust. I could almost hook it with a nail. In the kitchen, a cupboard banged, my mother moving through the house like punctuation. I let the drawer slide shut and told myself I'd come back with light and time and a witness. Some things, once opened, changed the room. I sat on my bed and set an alarm for 6:30. I stacked my receipts by category, lined up pens, checked the movers' numbers I'd bookmarked months ago when I thought about upgrading the sofa and dismissed it as unnecessary. My unknown caller buzzed one more time. I blocked it. I wrote the words I wouldn't say out loud because they'd taste like something I couldn't swallow. You don't get to take what you didn't carry. At 11:58 p.m., I sent Kristen the single text that sounded like a lever you pull when a train is on the wrong track. Check Granddad's will. Then I turned off the light and lay still, listening to the house breathe like a tired animal. If it remembered me, I hoped it would forgive what I had to do next. The next morning, I woke to the gray-blue light that only Vermont winters know how to spill across a window. My phone alarm pulsed at 6:30, insistent, but I'd already been awake. My mother's voice from last night replaying in loops, that cold 48-hour clock ticking inside my skull. I slid out of bed and sat cross-legged on the floor with the box of documents, spreading them like tarot cards. Bank statements, tax returns, and one paper I hadn't let myself look at in years, the mortgage payoff slip stamped paid in full. $80,000. My money. My overtime. My savings. My spine. Down the hall, the house groaned. My father coughed once, a brittle sound, and the pipe shuddered as he ran water in the bathroom. I tried not to imagine his eyes in the mirror, guilty, hollow, resigned. He was the kind of man who believed silence kept peace, but silence was what had carved this canyon between us. By 8 o'clock, I was standing outside Kristen's downtown office, clutching a travel mug of bitter coffee. She ushered me in without words. She had always been the calm in my storms. Sharp blazer, sharper eyes, the kind of presence that steadied you even when you were unraveling. "Tell me everything from the top," she said. So I did. Fork slam. 48 hours. Terra's sudden inheritance. My father's evasive silence. Kristen listened, like a surgeon prepping for an incision. When I finished, she leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Mara," she said carefully, "your parents might have forgotten something important. Did your grandfather leave a will?" The question hit like cold water. I don't know. He always said the house was his gift to us. To me. But when he died 2 years ago, I just assumed it went to my parents. Kristen's brow furrowed. "Give me an hour." I paced her office, tracing circles in the rug as she made calls. At 9:42, her phone buzzed. She picked up, scribbled notes, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read at first. "Mara," she said, voice low and certain, "your grandfather filed a will with the Chittenden County Clerk. It names you, sole heir to the Burlington property. Not your parents, not Terra. You." The words cracked the air. For a moment, all I could hear was the radiator knocking behind us, like it wanted to emphasize the sentence. "Me?" I whispered. "Are you sure?" She nodded. Signed, notarized, filed 3 years before his death. Ironclad. I sat hard on her couch, my palms sweating. Memory crashed over me, my grandfather on the porch, sipping from that pinecone mug, telling me, "This place will always be yours." I had laughed back then, brushing it off as grandfatherly comfort. Now it felt like a prophecy he'd tried to hand me, only for someone else to bury it. "Why didn't they tell me?" My voice broke. "Why keep that from me?" Kristen's jaw tightened. "Because if you didn't know, they could act like it never existed. They could manipulate the narrative, transfer the house, and you wouldn't question it. But now you know." The betrayal stung sharper than any fork slam. My parents hadn't just chosen Terra. They'd erased my grandfather's final wish, and they'd let me pour $80,000 into a house they knew was mine by law. My chest burned with a cocktail of anger and grief so strong it almost made me nauseous. Kristen tapped her pen on her notebook. "There's something else. The clerk mentioned a codicil might exist. Some kind of attached personal note or letter. It's not digitized, could be filed separately or kept by your father." A letter, my grandfather's handwriting, maybe his voice on paper. My throat closed. "What if it's here, in the house?" I said. My mind flicked to the stuck drawer in the hallway desk, the manila corner I'd glimpsed. Then you need to find it, Kristen said firmly. But for now, we build the case. Gather every proof of your financial contributions. Receipts, transfers, even text messages where your parents asked for help. It all matters. I nodded, already thinking in categories. Sofa, $2,200. Washer, $800. Property taxes, 4 installments of $1,100. Even curtains, $300. Each line a nail in the truth. I left her office with a folder of instructions and a resolve that felt harder than steel. Snowflakes drifted lazy and wet against my coat as I walked back toward the house. Across the street, Mrs. Linda was shoveling her walk, her knit hat too big for her head. She looked up and gave me a wave. I forced a smile. "You're out early," she called. "Big day," I answered, though the words tasted sour. As I reached my porch, I caught movement next door. Mr. William, in his heavy work boots, stood with his thermos, watching me longer than felt casual. Our eyes met. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. He gave me a stiff nod instead and turned away. What had he almost told me? Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, my mother's routine. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage where every piece of furniture had been moved an inch too far, the set waiting for a performance I hadn't auditioned for. I dropped my bag on the counter and pulled out the receipts I'd carried from Kristen's. I laid them flat, smoothing the crinkles, like lining up evidence for a jury. My jury wasn't in a courtroom. It was in the court of blood, memory, and betrayal. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the good daughter. I felt like the rightful heir. And I knew my family had just made the fight of their lives. The morning blurred into a flurry of lists. I pulled open drawers, sticky-noted furniture, and scribbled in a notebook until my pen cramped. Every object I tagged seemed to whisper, "I was bought with your overtime, not their charity." The flat-screen TV still had the receipt tucked in its manual. The washer in the basement bore the delivery slip with my name, not theirs. Even the curtains, soft beige, chosen to match the paint I rolled onto those walls myself, carried the weight of nights I'd skipped dinners out just to save for them. By 10 o'clock, I had a list that read less like belongings and more like an autopsy report of the last 5 years. Sofa, TV, washer, curtains, dresser, dining chairs, rugs, light fixtures. Each line was proof that while my parents looked west toward Terra, I had been the scaffolding keeping this house upright. I called Green Mountain Movers. A man named Tom answered with a gravelly voice, like someone who didn't ask questions he didn't need answered. "Rush job," I told him. "Today if possible. It's personal property. I'm taking what's mine." A pause, then a grunt. "Truck by noon. 3 guys. Cash or card?" "Card. Just come fast." After hanging up, I taped notes to the chairs. Mine. To the TV. Paid by me. My handwriting grew harsher with each stroke, as if my anger wanted to leave claw marks behind. At the door, a knock startled me. When I opened it, Mrs. Linda stood bundled in her red winter coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She held a small tin in her gloved hands. "Just made snickerdoodles," she said softly. "Thought you could use something sweet." Her kindness cracked something in me. I didn't tell her about the will or the ultimatum. It felt too raw, but I admitted I was moving things out. "It's complicated," I murmured. She touched my arm gently. "You've always been good to this house, Mara. Whatever's going on, don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her words dug deeper than she knew. I blinked fast, swallowed hard, and thanked her. She left with a nod, the snow crunching under her boots. Minutes later, Mr. William ambled over, still in his dusty work boots. He glanced around the half-empty living room. "Heard you're moving things," he said, voice cautious. "This place meant a lot to your granddad. And to you, I know." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. His eyes lingered a beat too long, as if he wanted to add something else, but he only tipped his thermos at me before walking away. I felt the unspoken words hang in the cold air between us. At noon sharp, the movers arrived. A white van pulling up the driveway, 3 men with padded gloves and blankets. They worked quickly, hauling the sofa and TV, wrapping the washer, loading my dresser. Each thud down the steps echoed like a heartbeat leaving the house. Watching them dismantle what I had built was both agonizing and satisfying. I wasn't giving Terra a furnished prize. She'd walk into echoes and empty walls. The house grew hollower by the minute. The rugs gone, the sofa stripped, the curtains pulled down. Suddenly every creak felt louder, every silence sharper. That's when the front door banged open. Terra stood there, suitcase in hand, her heels clicking like she was arriving at a hotel reservation. Her eyes swept the room, narrowing as they landed on the blank spaces where furniture used to be. "What the hell, Mara?" she snapped. "Where's everything?" I crossed my arms steady. I took what I bought. She dropped her suitcase with a thud. "Mom and Dad said this house is mine now. You don't get to strip it bare like some thief." I stepped closer, voice calm but cold. "A thief takes what isn't theirs. I only took what I paid for. You didn't contribute a dime." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You think you're entitled just because you threw money around? That doesn't make you the rightful owner. This is my home now. You're out." The words burned, but I refused to flinch. "You haven't been here in years, Terra. While you were off in California, I was here keeping the roof over their heads. Over yours too when you visit." She sneered. "Please. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go. Don't make it sound noble. Mom and Dad chose me for a reason." Her arrogance cut deeper than her words. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "They chose wrong. You'll never understand what it cost to hold this place together." She stormed through the house, opening cabinets, peering into the basement, each empty corner fueling her fury. Finally, she spun on me, eyes blazing. "You took everything, even the damn curtains?" "Only what I paid for. If you want a furnished house, go buy one yourself." Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. "Unbelievable. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They'll deal with you." I leaned against the doorway, unbothered. "Go ahead. They're not here." She froze, momentarily thrown. Then, fuming, she dialed anyway, pacing as she ranted into the phone. "Mom, she gutted the place. It's empty. Do something." I stayed silent, arms folded, letting her voice echo. She hung up, glaring at me. "They're coming back from Montpellier tonight. You're finished, Mara." I pointed to her suitcase. "You know where the door is." Her muttered curses trailed behind her as she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood in the silence she left, my heart pounding, but my resolve solid. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number flashing on the screen. This time I answered. A measured male voice came through, polite but deliberate. "Ms. Quinlan, I believe we should discuss title." At Kristen's apartment that evening, the city lights of Burlington flickered against the frosted windows, casting long shadows across her kitchen table piled with files. My belongings were already tucked away in a rented storage unit nearby, the movers paid, the receipts neatly stacked in my folder. But my heart was still hammering from Terra's arrival, from her voice echoing in the bare house like it already belonged to her. Kristen poured coffee into 2 mugs and pushed one toward me. "You said someone called?" I nodded. "A man. Calm, polite, said we should discuss title. Didn't give a name, but his tone..." I trailed off. It wasn't threatening, not exactly, but it had the finality of someone who held cards I hadn't seen yet. Kristen pulled out her laptop and started typing. "If it's who I think it is, you'll want to listen carefully. When a will is enforced this late, it forces everything into the light. Investors circle properties like this. They want clean titles, and they move fast once they smell family drama." "Investors?" I repeated, bitterness coating the word. She nodded. "They're not all vultures. Some are just pragmatic. If your grandfather's will is validated, the property technically belongs to you. That means you can sell before your parents can maneuver around it." The thought startled me. Sell? After everything I'd poured into that house? But the image of Terra standing in the gutted living room replayed like a warning. She'd claim every corner, every nail, and my parents would back her with practiced silence. My phone buzzed again. This time I put it on speaker. "Ms. Quinlan?" The same voice, smooth, professional. "This is Daniel Harper. I represent a local investment group. I understand there's a probate matter involving your Burlington property. We'd like to offer an expedited purchase. Clean transfer, immediate payment, no court delays." Kristen leaned closer, her lawyer's instincts sharp. "Mr. Harper, this call is premature," she said evenly, "but we'll keep your contact information." She ended it before he could argue. I stared at her. "You cut him off." "Because his eagerness tells me something. He knows you have leverage. Mara, don't see this as loss. See it as power. They thought you'd just fold. You won't." Her words steadied me, but my chest still felt raw. That night, as we mapped out affidavits and filing deadlines, my phone filled with voicemails from my parents. My mother's voice was shrill, accusing, "How dare you strip the house bare? Terra is heartbroken." My father's voice was quieter, weighted with disbelief. "Mara, there's a man in our living room claiming he bought the property. Explain this, please." I didn't call back, not yet. The next afternoon, Kristen met me at the courthouse. Papers signed, affidavits notarized, the will formally filed. The law was on my side now, and that changed everything. Within days, Harper's Group swooped in with a clean offer. I didn't love the idea of selling, but the alternative was endless war, and watching Terra plant her flag in soil that was never hers. When my parents returned to find Harper's team already measuring windows and speaking with the clerk, their panic reached a fever pitch. The calls came faster. My mother's tone shifted from outrage to pleading. "Mara, you're tearing the family apart. Don't do this." My father finally spoke in one long voicemail, his voice cracking in ways I'd never heard. "We kept the will from you because we didn't know what else to do. I'd made bad investments, medical bills, things we couldn't cover. We thought if we controlled the house, we could balance everything for both you and Terra. I was wrong. I see that now." For a moment, my anger tangled with pity. They weren't monsters, just people who'd made choices that cut me open. But pity wasn't enough to erase betrayal. That night, I walked back to the house one last time with Harper's permission to collect sentimental items. Snow whispered against the windows, the living room hollow and echoing without the sofa, curtains, or TV. My footsteps sounded too loud. In the kitchen, the chipped pine cone mug still sat on the counter, forgotten in the chaos. I picked it up, running my thumb over the tiny ladder of cracks. When I tilted it, a faint rattle sounded from inside the base. My heart skipped. I shook it again. There it was, a tiny, hidden weight. I turned it upside down, tapped the bottom gently. Something shifted, then slid. A folded slip of yellowed paper emerged from a false seam in the mug's base. My breath caught. My grandfather's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable, stared back at me. I unfolded the paper with hands that trembled, the way they had the first time I held a paycheck big enough to pay the mortgage arrears. The ink was faded, the strokes uneven, but the voice of my grandfather came alive between the lines. "Mara," it began, "if you're reading this, it means the house has been tested by storms. I can't protect it from anymore. I left it to you because you keep promises. Not because you're perfect, but because you stay when others walk away. This place needs that, but I ask you too, not to let walls trap you. A house is a gift, not a chain. If the family forgets what it means, defend yourself. But if they learn how to knock, leave a door open. You'll know when. Granddad." I sank onto the cold kitchen floor, clutching the letter. My chest felt too small for the storm inside. Rage, sorrow, validation, and something like grief for a man who saw me clearer than my own parents ever had. A creak behind me broke the silence. My parents stood in the doorway, coats still dusted with snow, their faces pale. They must have driven straight from Montpelier. My mother's eyes darted to the paper in my hands, then the mug, then back to me. "You found it," she whispered, not with surprise, but with dread. My father stepped forward, voice low. "I should have given it to you the day he died." I stared at him, the letter burning hot between my fingers. "Why didn't you?" He rubbed a hand over his face, sagging into the chair like an old man. "Because I was drowning, Mara. The medical bills, the bad investments, mistakes I kept from you. Because I couldn't bear you seeing me fail. Your mother thought if we let Terra have the house, she'd finally settle, finally stop drifting. We thought we were balancing things." His voice cracked. "It wasn't fair to you. I know that now." My mother's jaw tightened. "We weren't malicious. We were desperate. You think we don't see what you've done for this house? For us? We do. But Terra, she's fragile in ways you don't see. We thought giving her the home would save her." Her words stung because part of me recognized the twisted logic. My whole life, I'd been the one strong enough to endure, so they'd poured their protection into the weaker link. But endurance has a breaking point. I placed the letter flat on the table between us. "Granddad didn't trust you with this. He trusted me. You buried his words because they didn't fit your story." Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, broken only by the house groaning in the cold. Finally, I said, "It doesn't matter now. The sale is done. The deed's already changed hands. I'm not reversing it." My mother's face crumpled. "Mara, please." "No." My voice was steady, sharper than I'd ever let it be. I'll help in small ways. Groceries, maybe a little support while you adjust. But I won't be your lender, I won't be your scapegoat, and I won't let you rewrite what's mine anymore. They both looked smaller somehow, like children caught in a lie too big to untangle. My father's eyes glistened, but he nodded, almost as if he knew this was the only ending left. When I left that night, the mug was tucked carefully into my bag, the letter folded back inside its hidden seam. The house behind me wasn't mine anymore, but its memory, the good, the painful, the truth buried inside clay, would always be. Months later, in my new apartment downtown, I placed the mug on a shelf by the window. Sunlight caught the cracks in its glaze, making them shine like veins of silver. I'd built a new rhythm, work I loved, evenings that were quiet by choice, not silence forced on me. Kristen remained my anchor, reminding me that strength doesn't mean carrying everyone else. It means knowing when to put the load down. One evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Terra. Her voice was different, thin, hesitant. "Mara, if you're willing, I want to try again, but honest this time." I didn't delete it. I didn't call back either. I just placed the letter back into the mug's hollow base and let the quiet hold me. The door wasn't closed, just locked, and the key was mine.